I'm Rebecca Morgan, 28, and I never thought watching my sister Amber's wedding online would change my life forever. Between my grueling medical residency in Chicago and our family's estate in Connecticut, attending in person just wasn't possible. My parents assured me the professional live stream would make me feel like I was there. Part of me felt guilty for missing it, part relieved to avoid the drama, especially since I never trusted Jason, my sister's fiancé. Before I continue with this story that changed everything I thought I knew about my family, drop a comment telling me if you've ever witnessed something you weren't supposed to see and how it affected you. Life as an emergency medicine resident isn't for the faint of heart. My typical week involves 80-hour shifts surviving on vending machine snacks and lukewarm coffee, catching sleep in on-call rooms, and dealing with everything from minor lacerations to full cardiac arrests. It's exhausting, but I love it. The adrenaline rush when saving someone's life makes every sacrifice worth it. And sacrifices I've made plenty. My last relationship ended after my boyfriend gave me an ultimatum, him or medicine. My social life consists of occasional drinks with fellow residents who understand when I fall asleep mid-conversation. My small Chicago apartment remains mostly unfurnished 2 years after moving in because I'm rarely home to care. My family never quite understood my choices. My parents, Elizabeth and Richard Morgan, built their wealth through real estate development and cultivated a certain image in Connecticut society. Perfect home, perfect clothes, perfect children. Except I was never quite perfect enough. That role fell to my younger sister Amber. 3 years my junior at 25, she floated through life with the kind of effortless grace I always lacked. Homecoming queen sorority president, social media influencer with a growing following showcasing her picture-perfect life. While I struggled through organic chemistry exams, she was being featured in regional lifestyle magazines. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. We just exist in different orbits. When Amber got engaged to Jason Miller last year after a whirlwind 6-month romance, my parents were ecstatic. Jason came from the right family, had the right connections, said all the right things. On paper, he was perfect. In person, something about him made my skin crawl. The way his smile never reached his eyes. How he subtly redirected every conversation to himself. The possessive hand always placed on Amber's lower back. I tried voicing my concerns once during a rare weekend visit home. He just seems a bit calculated, I told Amber as we folded laundry in her room. That's rich coming from someone who categorizes blood loss by precise milliliter measurements, she laughed, but the smile faded quickly. Not everyone can be as analytical as you, Becca. Some of us just follow our hearts. The wedding planning consumed the family for months. My mother called daily with updates on floral arrangements, menu tastings, and seating charts. The subtle guilt trips came just as regularly. The photographer wants to know about family portraits, she'd say. I told him my eldest might not make it. Such a shame since these are forever. I tried explaining the reality of a surgical residency, the impossibility of requesting time off during certain rotations, how people's lives literally depended on my presence. But to them, it sounded like excuses. The truth was more complicated. Yes, getting time off was nearly impossible, but part of me felt relief at having a legitimate reason to watch from afar. I dreaded the inevitable questions from relatives I hadn't seen in years. Still no boyfriend. At your age, I was already married with a baby on the way. All that education and you still have how many years of training left? You look tired, dear. Medicine must be so draining. Amber always looks so refreshed. When my parents suggested the live stream solution, I agreed immediately. They hired a professional videography team to broadcast the entire event from ceremony to reception so I could be there in spirit. I arranged to have the rare full day off, ordered my favorite takeout, and even bought a bottle of champagne to toast the happy couple from 800 miles away. The night before the wedding, my cousin Megan texted me, "Kinda wish you were here. Things feel weird." When I pressed for details, she went silent. I chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters affecting the whole family. As I settled into my couch, that Saturday morning laptop perched on the coffee table and champagne chilling, I had no idea I was about to witness the most dramatic day in my family's carefully curated history. I woke up that Saturday with a knot in my stomach. Despite telling myself I was fine missing the wedding, I felt unexpectedly emotional. I pulled out the sage green dress I'd bought months ago when I still thought I might attend. It seemed silly to dress up just to sit alone in my apartment, but something about wearing pajamas to watch my sister's wedding felt wrong. My apartment, usually cluttered with medical journals and takeout containers, had been cleaned thoroughly the night before. I'd even splurged on a bouquet of white roses and lilies that matched Amber's bridal flowers, according to my mother's detailed descriptions. Small touches to make me feel connected to the event happening hundreds of miles away. At precisely 11:00 a.m. Central Time, I opened my laptop, clicked the private link my parents had sent, and entered the password AmberJason2025. The live stream began with professional production quality that impressed even my tech-skeptical mind. Multiple camera angles, crisp sound, smooth transitions. My parents had spared no expense. The opening shots panned across our family estate, the place where Amber and I had grown up. The sprawling lawn had been transformed with white tents, thousands of twinkling lights and floral arches. 300 white chairs lined up in perfect rows. A string quartet played softly as elegantly dressed guests arrived air-kissing and champagne-sipping. I recognized faces from childhood. My father's business partners, my mother's charity committee friends, relatives who had watched Amber and me grow up, some I hadn't seen in years. Uncle Robert still sporting his trademark bow tie. Grandmother Wilson looking frailer than I remembered. Former neighbors, family, friends, college, classmates. The camera occasionally cut to behind-the-scenes moments. Caterers arranging elaborate food displays. Florists making last-minute adjustments. The wedding planner with her clipboard directing traffic with military precision. Then came shots of the wedding party preparing. My parents looked immaculate, mother in a custom pale blue gown, father in his bespoke tuxedo. Yet, something about their interaction caught my attention. The way my mother's smile tightened when my father checked his phone. How he refilled his scotch at 11:30 a.m., something he rarely did before evening. The bridesmaids fluttered around in matching rose gold dresses, Amber's college roommates, our cousins Emily and Megan and her best friend Tara. They laughed and posed for photos, but the camera occasionally caught moments when the smiles dropped, replaced by whispered conversations that looked more serious than pre-wedding excitement warranted. In the groom's suite, Jason and his groomsmen were less subdued. They passed around flasks, straightened ties, and cracked jokes. But here, too, I noticed discordant elements. Jason's best man, Marcus, seemed particularly on edge, repeatedly pulling Jason aside for intense conversations. Each time, Jason would shake him off, laugh too loudly, and rejoin the group. The ceremony was scheduled for 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time. As the hour approached, guests took their seats, and the string quartet shifted to more formal processional music. I poured my first glass of champagne as the officiant and Jason took their places at the altar. The camera zoomed in on Jason's face as he waited for his bride. He looked handsome in his custom tuxedo, but his smile seemed practiced. Just before the bridal march began, he glanced at his phone one last time, and I caught something irritation flash across his features before he composed himself. The processional began. Bridesmaids and groomsmen paired off and walked the flower-lined aisle. My parents followed. My mother's smile looked perfect, but her eyes scanned the crowd continuously, as if assessing who had witnessed what. My father's jaw was set in a way I recognized from childhood, the expression he wore when closing difficult business deals. When Amber appeared at the end of the aisle on our father's arm, I gasped along with the wedding guests. My sister was truly stunning. Her gown, a custom designer creation with delicate lace detailing, hugged her figure perfectly before flowing into a cathedral train. Her blonde hair was styled in an intricate updo adorned with tiny pearl pins. She looked like a magazine bride. But as the camera zoomed in on her face, I noticed her smile trembled slightly. Her steps down the aisle had a hesitancy that seemed at odds with the confident sister I knew. When she reached Jason, her hands visibly shook as they joined his. I told myself I was overanalyzing. Of course, she was nervous. It was her wedding day with hundreds of people watching. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The ceremony proceeded with traditional elegance. The officiant spoke about love and commitment. Readings were given by family friends. Vows were exchanged, traditional ones, not personalized as Amber had once mentioned wanting. When the officiant asked if anyone knew any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, an uncomfortable moment stretched seconds longer than it should have. The camera caught Marcus, the best man, shifting his weight, his expression conflicted. My eyes were drawn to a woman in the back rows, someone I didn't recognize, who seemed to be blinking back tears. The moment passed. Rings were exchanged, Amber's hands still trembling, Jason's grip on her fingers a little too tight. They were pronounced husband and wife. Their kiss seemed perfunctory rather than passionate. As they recessed down the aisle to applause and music, I watched Amber's smile fix in place like a mask. Jason waved to guests but immediately dropped Amber's hand once they reached the end of the aisle, moving to speak with his groomsmen instead of staying with his new wife. The live stream followed guests to the cocktail hour. The camera panned across ice sculptures, champagne fountains, and artistic hors d'oeuvre displays. My parents worked the crowd separately rather than as a team. In one frame, I caught them having what appeared to be a tense conversation in a corner, my mother gesturing sharply, before noticing a guest approaching and instantly transforming into the perfect hostess. The reception began with introductions of the wedding party. Everyone took their places at the elaborate head table beneath crystal chandeliers. The first dance between Amber and Jason looked well rehearsed but oddly formal. I noticed how she seemed to be counting steps rather than losing herself in the moment. My father's toast started strong but contained strange pauses, moments where he seemed to be choosing his words with unusual care. Jason has brought something unique to our family, he said at one point, his expression unreadable. Amber deserves all the happiness life can offer. The subtle emphasis wasn't lost on me. Growing increasingly uneasy, I texted my cousin Megan, "Is everything okay there? Something feels off." Her response came 20 minutes later, "You have no idea what's happening here." I tried calling my mother, but the call went straight to voicemail. I texted Amber congratulations, knowing she wouldn't see it until later, fighting the urge to add, "Are you really happy?" As the reception continued, the camera caught concerning moments between the staged events. Jason disappearing for long stretches. Amber sitting alone at the head table, smiling woodenly whenever anyone approached. My mother disappearing to the bathroom and returning with freshly applied makeup that didn't quite hide her reddened eyes. Best man Marcus drinking heavily, his expression growing darker as the evening progressed. And throughout it all, the strange woman from the ceremony watching from the periphery, never joining in the festivities but never leaving either. Something was definitely wrong in the picture-perfect wedding my family had created, and I was about to discover just how wrong from 800 miles away through a computer screen. The dinner service had just concluded when I noticed the first unmistakable sign that something was seriously wrong. The live stream caught Amber excusing herself from the head table, walking with measured steps toward the estate's main house. What struck me was how no one, not Jason, not my parents, seemed to notice or care that the bride had left her own reception. The camera followed the planned events, servers clearing plates, the band playing upbeat songs, guests beginning to fill the dance floor. But in the background, through the large windows of the estate, I could see Amber standing alone on the second-floor balcony. Even from a distance, the set of her shoulders conveyed deep distress. She returned 10 minutes later, makeup refreshed, but eyes lacking their usual sparkle. Jason, who had been laughing with groomsmen at the bar, barely acknowledged her return. When he did finally rejoin her at the head table, their interaction seemed performative, hands held. When people watched, dropped the moment attention shifted elsewhere. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Everything's fine. Stop calling everyone. Enjoy the live stream. The terseness was unusual for her typically verbose messages. Something was definitely off. The wedding planner announced it was time for toasts. My father had already given his carefully worded speech during dinner. Now it was the best man's turn. Marcus approached the microphone, unsteadily champagne glass in hand. Jason immediately tensed. I've known Jason since college. Marcus began his words slightly slurred. Known him through many relationships. The emphasis on many wasn't subtle. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jason's always been good at compartmentalizing his life, Marcus continued. Different friends for different situations, different stories for different people. Jason laughed loudly, cutting through the growing tension. Buddy, I think you've had enough champagne. He rose from his seat, moving toward Marcus with a fixed smile that didn't reach his eyes. Marcus stepped back from Jason's approach, clutching the microphone tighter. But I never thought he'd... The wedding planner swiftly intervened, taking the microphone with practiced grace. Let's thank Marcus for those heartfelt words. And now let's hear from the maid of honor. The camera caught the silent exchange between Jason and Marcus. Jason's hand gripping Marcus's arm tightly, as he whispered something that made the color drain from Marcus's face. They separated quickly, all smiles for the watching guests, but the tension between them was palpable even through my screen. Amber's maid of honor, her college roommate Kristen, gave a generic speech about friendship and finding true love. Throughout it, Amber's smile remained fixed, her eyes darting occasionally to the back of the room, where I now noticed the unknown woman continued to hover near the exit. After the speeches, Amber and Jason cut the cake. The traditional playfulness of the moment felt forced. When Jason pushed cake toward Amber's mouth, his hand seemed to slip, smearing frosting across her cheek rather than delivering it neatly to her lips. The crowd laughed. Amber's eyes flashed with something that looked like fear before she quickly composed herself, laughing along as she wiped her face. I found myself leaning closer to my screen, wishing I could step through it and pull my sister aside, ask her what was really happening. The distance between Chicago and Connecticut had never felt greater. The live stream switched to showing guests dancing the party seemingly in full swing. But the camera occasionally caught concerning tableaus Jason's father and mine in what appeared to be a heated discussion by the bar. My mother sitting alone at an empty table checking her watch repeatedly. Amber dancing with elderly relatives while Jason was nowhere to be seen. I texted Megan again, please tell me what's happening. This time her response came quickly. Jason disappeared upstairs with some woman. Marcus followed them. Amber is pretending not to notice. Your mom is about to have a meltdown. My heart sank. I'd never trusted Jason, but even I hadn't expected him to be so blatant on his wedding day. Poor Amber, was she really ignoring this? Or was she trapped in a performance she couldn't escape? I watched helplessly as the camera panned across the reception, the videographer oblivious to the real story unfolding. When the frame finally caught Jason again, he was returning from the main house, straightening his tie, his hair slightly disheveled. The unknown woman emerged from the same door moments later, her expression unreadable. Marcus intercepted Jason near the bar, and though I couldn't hear their exchange, the body language was clear, Marcus gesturing angrily, Jason responding dismissively. Two groomsmen quickly moved to separate them, guiding them to opposite sides of the reception. When Jason returned to Amber's side, he whispered something in her ear. Whatever he said caused her smile to falter momentarily, before she recovered, nodding mechanically, as he led her to the dance floor for another obligatory wedding moment. I tried calling my father this time. To my surprise, he answered, moving away from the reception to take the call. Rebecca, this isn't a good time, he said, voice low and tense. Dad, what's going on? Something's clearly wrong. Everything's fine, he insisted, the same phrase my mother had texted. Just some minor complications. Nothing to worry about. Is Amber okay? She doesn't look happy. He paused too long before answering. It's her wedding day. Of course she's happy. Dad, I need to go. Your mother's calling me. He hung up before I could respond. The camera caught him returning to the reception, checking his watch, then having a brief, intense conversation with the wedding planner. Something was being reconfigured, schedules adjusted. The wedding planner took the microphone, announcing it was time for the bouquet toss, evidently moving up elements of the reception that would normally come later. The traditional schedule was being abandoned, events compressed. They were trying to end things early. As bridesmaids gathered for the bouquet toss, I noticed Megan and another bridesmaid, Tara, in serious conversation. Tara looked toward the house, then back to Megan, nodding with determination. They separated as Amber approached with her bouquet, both forcing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Amber turned her back to the assembled single women pausing before the toss. For a moment, her shoulders slumped, as if the weight of pretense had become too heavy to bear. Then she straightened, plastered on a smile, and tossed the bouquet with mechanical precision. The camera caught the bouquet sailing through the air, then landing directly in the hands of the unknown woman, who had somehow joined the group of single ladies without anyone noticing. An awkward silence fell over the crowd as the woman clutched the bouquet, staring directly at Jason with an expression of mingled triumph and sorrow. The wedding planner quickly redirected attention, announcing the garter toss would happen next. But Jason was once again missing from the scene. The camera panned around the reception, finally locating him in intense conversation with his father near the bar, both men gesturing sharply. My screen filled with the image of Amber standing alone in the center of the dance floor. No groom in sight, the crowd's excitement fading to confused murmurs as the minutes stretched on. In that unguarded moment, with no one immediately beside her, my sister's careful facade crumbled. The camera caught the precise instant when her eyes filled with tears, her lower lip trembling before she bit it hard, struggling to maintain composure. It was the most honest moment I'd seen all day, and it broke my heart. By the 2-hour mark of the reception, the carefully orchestrated wedding had begun to fray visibly at the edges. The camera work remained professional, but even the videographers couldn't hide the growing tension. They kept switching angles, perhaps trying to capture only the happy moments, but inadvertently revealing the dysfunction underneath. Guests had separated into clear factions. Jason's college friends clustered near the bar, drinking heavily and checking their phones. My parents' friends maintained polite conversation at their tables, though their frequent glances toward the family suggested they sensed something amiss. Younger guests filled the dance floor, perhaps oblivious, or simply choosing to enjoy the excellent band regardless of the underlying drama. My mother had stationed herself near the cake table, maintaining a rigid smile while continuously scanning the room. My father moved between guests like a political candidate, hand-shaking and back-slapping with increasing desperation, as though enough small talk could paper over the cracks forming in the event. Amber sat at the head table, making minimal conversation with relatives who approached her. Jason circulated separately, returning to her side only when formally required. They hadn't exchanged a genuine word in over an hour by my count. The wedding planner announced that Jason wanted to make a special toast to his new bride. He took the microphone, champagne glass in hand, and turned toward Amber with practiced charm. When I first met Amber, he began, his voice smooth as silk. I knew she was special. Not just because of her beauty, though she is the most beautiful woman in the room. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. But because of her family, her background, her connections. He smiled toward my parents. Some might say I hit the jackpot. The comment hung awkwardly in the air. Even through the live stream, I could sense guests exchanging uncomfortable glances. It sounded less like a declaration of love and more like an acknowledgement of a successful business transaction. To my gorgeous bride, Jason concluded, raising his glass. Thank you for everything you've brought to my life. Guests dutifully raised their glasses. Amber's smile was so brittle I feared her face might crack. As Jason leaned down to kiss her cheek for the cameras, his hand gripped her arm with visible force. The moment he pulled away, she rubbed the spot, a fleeting wince crossing her features. I fumbled for my phone, texting Megan frantically, "Is he hurting her? What the hell is happening?" No response came. When the camera panned across the bridal party table, Megan's seat was empty. The music resumed the band, playing upbeat dance numbers that gradually drew people back to the dance floor. For about 20 minutes, the reception appeared to regain some normalcy. Then the first major incident occurred. Marcus, visibly intoxicated, now approached Jason near the bar. The camera wasn't focused on them directly, but caught their interaction in the background of a shot meant to showcase the elaborate ice sculpture. Their conversation quickly escalated to an argument. Marcus jabbed a finger into Jason's chest. Jason grabbed Marcus's wrist, twisting it away. Words were exchanged that made Jason's face contort with anger. When Jason shoved Marcus hard enough to make him stumble backward into a cocktail table, guests nearby gasped. Marcus caught himself straightening with a dangerous expression. Two groomsmen intervened, pulling Marcus away while Jason laughed it off loudly, raising his hands in mock surrender as if it had been playful roughhousing rather than genuine hostility. "Just too much champagne for the best man," he announced to nearby guests who laughed nervously. The camera quickly cut away to guests dancing, but not before I caught the look of pure hatred Marcus directed at Jason over his shoulder as he was led outside. The live stream continued to switch between different areas of the reception, but the camera occasionally caught troubling scenes it perhaps didn't intend to broadcast. My mother in the powder room door, ajar, dabbing at tears, while whispering furiously into her phone. My father and Jason's father standing toe-to-toe near the coat check, voices low, but body language hostile. Amber sitting alone at the head table, methodically shredding a napkin into tiny pieces, eyes vacant. And most concerning, Jason disappearing into the main house, again this time for over 30 minutes. When the camera eventually caught him, returning his bow tie was loose hair disheveled. The angle shifted, following him down a hallway where he encountered the mysterious woman from earlier. This time, their confrontation was partially audible. "You promised this was over," the woman hissed, blocking his path. "Lower your voice," Jason responded, glancing around nervously. "This isn't the place." "When is the place after you've accessed her trust fund, after you've moved us again?" "I can't keep doing this," he muttered, attempting to step around her. She grabbed his arm. "Neither can I." The camera abruptly cut away the videographer, perhaps finally realizing they were capturing something they shouldn't. But the damage was done. I'd heard enough to confirm my worst suspicions about Jason. I tried calling Amber directly, knowing she wouldn't answer during her reception, but desperate to reach her nonetheless. As expected, the call went to voicemail. "Amber, it's Becca. Call me as soon as you can. I'm worried about you, whatever's happening there. Just call me okay." The reception continued its march toward the next scheduled event, the cake-cutting ceremony. Guests gathered around the elaborate 5-tier cake phones raised to capture the moment. Amber and Jason took their positions, both wearing smiles that looked physically painful to maintain. The wedding planner handed them the ceremonial knife. As they positioned their hands together on the handle, preparing to make the first cut movement at the edge of the crowd, caught my attention. Marcus was back, pushing his way forward, champagne glass still in hand, but determination replacing his earlier intoxicated stumbling. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a microphone from a nearby table. "I can't let this happen anymore," he announced, his voice cutting through the music and conversation. The room fell silent. Jason froze, knife still poised over the cake, his face draining of color. Marcus continued, "Tell them the truth, or I will." Jason's expression transformed from shock to fury in an instant. He dropped Amber's hand, stepping toward Marcus with undisguised rage. "Shut your mouth," he growled, forgetting the microphone still captured his words. Amber stood immobile beside the cake, confusion and fear warring on her face. My parents moved simultaneously toward the unfolding scene, my father's hand extended, as if to physically stop what was happening, my mother's expression pure panic. From the back of the crowd, the mystery woman pushed forward, her face set with determination. "He's already married," she called out, her voice, carrying even without a microphone. "To me?" The words landed like a bomb in the silent room. Gasps and murmurs erupted from the guests. Amber's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in shock as she turned to Jason. And then the live stream froze. The image on my screen captured the perfect tableau of chaos, Jason's face, contorted with rage lunging toward Marcus, Amber's expression of dawning horror, my parents' identical looks of shocked dismay, the mystery woman, apparently Jason's wife, stepping into the center of the frame, Marcus being restrained by two groomsmen, guests with mouths open in shock. The buffering circle spun in the center of my screen. I refreshed the page frantically. Nothing. Tried a different browser. Still frozen. Called the emergency contact number for the videography company. Straight to voicemail. The most critical moment of the wedding, and I was cut off from it entirely. For 5 excruciating minutes, I stared at the frozen image of chaos captured on my screen. The buffering circle continued its endless spin, promising a resumption of the live stream that didn't come. I refreshed the page repeatedly, rebooted my router, even restarted my laptop. All the usual tech troubleshooting steps that felt painfully inadequate given what was unfolding 800 miles away. The image remained seared in my mind. Jason's face twisted with rage, his body in motion toward Marcus. Amber's expression of dawning comprehension and horror. The unknown woman, apparently Jason's wife, moving into the center of the scene with grim determination. My parents looking simultaneously shocked and strangely resigned, as if a feared disaster had finally materialized. I called every family member at the wedding, my parents, Amber cousins, even distant relatives whose numbers I had to dig from old emails. No one answered. Text messages went unread. It was as if the entire wedding party had gone dark simultaneously. Finally, nearly an hour after the freeze, my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Total disaster. Call you when I can. The 5 words sent my anxiety spiraling. What constituted a total disaster at a wedding? Physical altercation, police involvement, medical emergency. The possibilities multiplied in my mind, each more alarming than the last. I paced my small apartment, Champagne, forgotten, repeatedly checking the live stream, which now showed only an error message, stream interrupted. Please stand by. After another 30 minutes of silence, the live stream unexpectedly reconnected. But instead of returning to the cake-cutting scene, it showed an empty reception area. Tables with half-eaten cake slices and abandoned champagne glasses. Centerpieces askew. The band's equipment still set up, but no musicians in sight. Staff members quietly clearing debris that looked suspiciously like broken glass. A single shoe, one of Amber's bridesmaids, I thought, lay on its side near the dance floor. The camera panned across the deserted reception, as if the videographer had returned to the scene after everyone had fled and was documenting the aftermath without narration. No guests remained. No bride or groom. No jubilant celebration. Just the hollow shell of what should have been my sister's perfect day. The live stream cut out again after these brief ghostly images, this time permanently. I sat stunned on my couch trying to make sense of what I'd witnessed. Then, galvanized by a surge of protective instinct for my sister, I made a decision. I needed to be there. I pulled up airline schedules on my phone, searching for the next flight from Chicago to Hartford. A red-eye leaving in 3 hours had 1 seat left. I booked it without hesitation, price be damned. I called my chief resident while throwing essentials into an overnight bag, explaining a family emergency without details. He was surprisingly understanding. Perhaps the desperation in my voice conveyed the urgency. Take 2 days, he said. I'll cover your shifts. The rideshare to O'Hare International Airport crawled through Saturday night traffic. I kept checking my phone obsessively, hoping for updates, finding none. I tried reconstructing the scene from the fragments I'd witnessed, filling gaps with speculation that grew increasingly alarming. At the airport, I finally received another text from Megan while waiting at the gate. Police just left. Jason gone. Amber with your parents. Don't post anything online. Police. The situation had escalated beyond even my worst predictions. During the flight, disconnected from communication, my mind cycled through scenarios. I pieced together the clues: the mystery woman claiming to be Jason's wife, Marcus's aborted warning, Jason's suspicious disappearances throughout the reception, the uncomfortable toast about Amber's connections and hitting the jackpot. Had my sister unknowingly married an already married man? Was it all an elaborate con to access the Morgan family wealth? The pieces fit together with sickening clarity. The plane landed in Hartford at 2:37 a.m. I rented a car and drove through the darkness toward our family estate in the Connecticut countryside, the familiar route now feeling ominous. The property came into view just before 4:00 a.m. grand and imposing against the night sky. Despite the hour, lights blazed from several windows. The circular driveway still held a few cars, my parents', Amber's, and several I didn't recognize. The wedding detritus remained visible in the moonlight. Dismantled tents awaiting removal. Abandoned floral arrangements, scattered programs blowing across the lawn. I parked and approached the front door with a growing sense of dread. Rather than using my key, I rang the bell. After a long pause, my father opened it, looking a decade older than he had on the live stream hours earlier. "Rebecca," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "You didn't need to come." "Of course I did," I replied, stepping past him into the foyer. "Where's Amber?" He gestured vaguely toward the living room. "With your mother. And some others." I followed the sound of hushed voices to find a tableau that confirmed the evening's disaster. My mother sat rigid on the antique sofa, still in her formal gown, but with her carefully styled hair now falling loose around her shoulders. Next to her, Amber remained in her wedding dress, the once pristine fabric now crumpled and stained makeup streaking her pale face. Cousin Megan and bridesmaid Tara occupied nearby chairs, both looking shell-shocked. A man in a suit I didn't recognize stood by the fireplace typing notes into a tablet. They all looked up at my entrance. Amber's face crumpled at the sight of me. "Becca," she whispered, rising unsteadily. I crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling my sister into a fierce hug, feeling her body shake with silent sobs against mine. "I'm here now," I murmured into her hair. "Whatever happened, we'll fix it." "You can't fix this," my mother said sharply, her voice brittle. "No one can." The man by the fireplace cleared his throat. "I should go. We have enough for the initial report." He nodded toward my father, who had entered behind me. "Mr. Morgan, I'll be in touch tomorrow. Later today. Mrs. Miller." "Mrs. Morgan, he corrected, glancing uncomfortably at Amber. "We'll need your formal statement when you're feeling up to it." After he left, the story spilled out in fragments from multiple voices. Jason Miller was indeed already married. Had been for 3 years to a woman named Laura from his hometown. They had a complicated on-again, off-again relationship. During their off periods, he pursued other women, wealthy ones, preferably. Amber wasn't the first he'd wooed with marriage in mind, but she was the first where he'd gone through with a wedding. Marcus found out last week, Megan explained, voice ragged from what had evidently been hours of similar recounting. Jason's wife contacted him with proof marriage certificate, photos, everything. Marcus confronted Jason privately, gave him a chance to call it off. Jason threatened him, Tara continued. Said he'd ruin his reputation, career, everything if he spoke up. Claimed Amber knew about the situation and was fine with it. Which I absolutely did. Not, Amber interjected, fresh tears welling. I had no idea. My mother made a small, pained sound. We all missed the signs, she admitted quietly. Or ignored them. My father, standing stiffly by the doorway, shook his head. Not all of us. I had concerns. I hired a private investigator 2 months ago. This revelation brought stunned silence to the room. My mother turned to him, face pale with shock. You never said anything to me, she accused. The initial reports were inconclusive, he replied, defensively. Just some financial irregularities, unusual travel patterns. Nothing concrete. The final report wasn't due until next week. His voice hardened. Too late, as it turns out. So what happened after the live stream cut out, I asked, still holding Amber's trembling hand. The chaos had apparently escalated quickly. Jason initially denied everything, claiming Laura was a delusional ex. But then Marcus produced copies of the marriage certificate and recent photos of Jason and Laura together. When backed into a corner, Jason's demeanor changed completely. It was like watching someone transform, Tara said, shuddering. One minute he was the charming man we all knew, the next he was vicious. He'd physically shoved Marcus, who fell into the wedding cake, toppling the elaborate creation. When Amber's cousin Ryan intervened, Jason punched him, breaking his nose. General chaos erupted as guests either fled or tried to restrain Jason, who continued to lash out violently. He looked at me, Amber, said, her voice small, and said I should have read the prenup more carefully, that I was still useful to him, legally married or not. She wrapped her arms around herself protectively. Then he just left, pushed through everyone, and walked out. The police had been called, statements taken. Jason had disappeared before officers arrived, his car gone from the parking area. Laura had remained, providing her own statement and apologizing repeatedly to Amber, claiming she'd tried to stop him for months. Did any of you know? I asked, finally, looking at each person in turn. Any suspicions at all? The responses were varied. My father admitted to concerns about Jason's business dealings, but not personal life. Megan had thought he seemed off, but attributed it to pre-wedding nerves. My mother had noticed Jason's occasional unexplained absences, but accepted his business travel excuses. I knew Amber whispered the admission, clearly painful. Not about Laura specifically, but I knew something wasn't right. There were so many inconsistencies, stories that didn't quite match up calls he'd taken private. She looked up at me, eyes swimming with tears. I just wanted so badly for it to work. Everyone was so excited about the wedding. Mom had put so much into planning. I thought I was being paranoid. The confession broke my heart. My strong, vibrant sister had silenced her own instincts for fear of disappointing others. Amber, I said firmly, this is not your fault. He deceived everyone systematically and intentionally. The Morgan family reputation is ruined, my mother moaned, preoccupied as always with appearances. Everyone saw. Everyone knows. Mom, I said sharply, that's what you're worried about right now. Your daughter just discovered her marriage is a fraud, possibly illegal, and you're concerned about gossip. My father stepped forward. Rebecca, that's enough. We're all upset. No, it's not enough, I countered, years of frustration bubbling to the surface. This whole disaster happened because this family cares more about appearances than reality. We all had doubts about Jason, but no one spoke up because he looked good on paper, took nice photos, said the right things to the right people. The room fell silent, my words hanging in the air. She's right, Amber said finally, her voice stronger than before. We've all been living in a beautiful illusion, and look where it got us. In the heavy silence that followed, I realized I'd never felt more connected to my sister than in this moment of complete catastrophe. The facades had crumbled, leaving only the unvarnished truth, painful but real. Dawn was breaking outside, casting long shadows through the windows. None of us had slept all, still dressed in the previous day's finery, now rumpled and stained. The beautiful wedding, meticulously planned for a year, had ended in shambles after less than 6 hours. What happens now? Megan asked the question no one else had voiced. Amber straightened her shoulders, a flash of her natural resilience showing through the heartbreak. Now, she said quietly, we deal with reality instead of appearances, starting with finding out exactly what Jason's plan was and how much damage he's done. The next 24 hours unfolded in a blur of revelations, each more disturbing than the last. After grabbing a few hours of restless sleep, we gathered in my father's study to assess the full extent of Jason's deception. My father's private investigator, now working overtime, delivered preliminary findings that painted a damning picture. Jason Miller had a pattern of inserting himself into wealthy families, always targeting the most vulnerable member. Before Amber, there had been at least 2 other women from prominent East Coast families. He'd gotten engaged to one, but broke it off after securing a loan for a business venture. The other relationship ended when her family hired their own investigator. He was getting bolder, the investigator explained via conference call, more confident in his methods. The marriage to Laura gave him a respectable background story while still allowing him freedom to operate. How did he pass the background check? My father demanded, shuffling through papers on his desk. He didn't need to fake his identity. Jason Miller is his real name, his credentials legitimate. He simply omitted certain facts like his existing marriage and created a narrative that fit what people wanted to hear. The most alarming discovery came when my father's financial advisor arrived that afternoon. Jason had wasted no time accessing Amber's accounts. The prenuptial agreement, which Amber admitted to signing without careful review, contained clauses granting him management authority over certain assets immediately upon marriage. He transferred $215,000 this morning, the advisor reported grimly. 3:42 a.m. to be precise. Just hours after the wedding fell apart. Can we stop it? My mother asked, pacing nervously. We've frozen all remaining accounts and filed fraud reports, but that initial transfer will be difficult to recover. He routed it through multiple banks. Amber sat silently through these discussions, her expression hardening with each new revelation. The shock was wearing off, replaced by cold anger. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I want everything documented for the police. Every transfer, every lie, every manipulation. I want him held accountable. Sweetheart, my mother began hesitantly, perhaps we should handle this quietly. The scandal is already— No, Amber cut her off sharply. No more hiding unpleasant realities to save face. That's what allowed him to operate in the first place. Everyone's concern with appearances. She turned to the financial advisor. Document everything, please. I'll be pressing charges. Pride swelled in my chest at my sister's newfound resolve. The afternoon brought another visitor, Laura Miller, Jason's legal wife. She'd returned at Amber's invitation despite my parents' objections. Thin and tired-looking in jeans and a simple blouse, she seemed a world away from the wedding guests of yesterday. I'm so sorry, she said immediately upon entering the living room where we waited. I tried to stop this for months. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I asked, not unkindly but directly. Laura sank onto the edge of a chair. Fear mostly. Jason can be frightening when crossed. And manipulation. He convinced me each time that he was just running a brief con, nothing serious, no real harm done. She twisted her wedding ring. Then I found out about the actual wedding plans with Amber. That crossed a line I couldn't ignore. Over the next hour, Laura filled in crucial pieces of the puzzle. She and Jason had married young in their small hometown. He'd been charming, ambitious, always dreaming of a bigger life. When those dreams didn't materialize quickly enough, he began developing increasingly elaborate schemes. He doesn't just want money, she explained. He wants status connections, legitimacy in high society. Your family represented everything he coveted. Were you part of the cons? My father asked, bluntly. Laura flinched, but answered honestly. Sometimes in the beginning. Small roles, nothing major. I believed we were just borrowing from people who wouldn't miss it. But it evolved into something darker. She looked directly at Amber. I was never comfortable with him pursuing actual relationships, especially not marriage. That's why I finally came to Marcus with proof. Why stay with him at all? My mother asked, clearly struggling to understand. It's complicated, Laura replied, a familiar refrain among those trapped in toxic relationships. There's the Jason everyone sees charming, attentive, making you feel like the center of the universe. And then there's the other side. She left the thought unfinished, but her expression conveyed volumes. By evening, 2 police detectives had joined us, recording formal statements and cataloging evidence. They confirmed what we already suspected: Jason had fled. His last known location was an ATM withdrawal in New Jersey heading south. They were coordinating with authorities in multiple states. Is this enough for criminal charges? Amber asked. Fraud identity, concealment, bigamy, potential assault from the altercation at the reception, the senior detective replied. Yes, Miss Morgan. More than enough. After the officials left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the family. The adrenaline of investigation had temporarily distracted us from the emotional weight of what had happened. Now, in the quiet evening hours, that reality crashed back. Amber disappeared upstairs, returning minutes later with her suitcase. "I can't stay here tonight," she announced. "Not with all the wedding. Everything's still around." "Where will you go?" my mother asked, alarmed. "A hotel." "I'm taking her to my apartment in the city," Megan offered. "She shouldn't be alone." My mother began to protest, but I intervened. "That's a good idea. Some distance from this house might help." After they left, I confronted my parents directly in a conversation long overdue. "You both suspected something was wrong with Jason, yet neither of you spoke up clearly. Why?" My mother looked away. "It's not that simple, Rebecca." "It is, actually. Your daughter's well-being should matter more than appearances." "We did try," my father insisted defensively. "I hired the investigator without telling anyone, without warning Amber directly. I didn't want to upset her without proof. She seemed so happy." Did she seem like she was playing a role she thought you wanted?" My mother's composure finally cracked. "Of course we wanted her happiness. We've always wanted both of you to be happy." "No," I countered, years of frustration finding voice. "You've wanted us to create the appearance of happiness in ways you approved of. There's a difference." The conversation continued late into the night, painful but necessary. My typically controlled parents revealed vulnerabilities I'd rarely seen. My mother admitted to ignoring warning signs because Jason fulfilled her vision of the perfect son-in-law. My father confessed his investigation came too late because he'd initially been impressed by Jason's business acumen and connections. "We failed her," my father said, finally, the admission clearly difficult for him. "Both of you, really? Creating this pressure to be perfect." It wasn't a complete reckoning, but it was a start. As I finally went to bed in my childhood room, surrounded by reminders of the carefully curated life my parents had constructed, I felt both exhausted and oddly hopeful. Perhaps from the ashes of this disaster, something more authentic could emerge for our family. The following morning, I drove to Megan's apartment to check on Amber. I found my sister sitting on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, despite the warm day, staring blankly at the skyline. "How are you holding up?" I asked, taking the chair beside her. "I keep replaying everything," she said quietly. Looking for the moments I should have recognized what was happening. There were so many signs. "We all missed them," I reminded her. "He was skilled at deception, but I was closest to him. I should have known." She turned to face me, eyes red-rimmed but dry. I ignored my instincts because I wanted so badly to be the perfect daughter with the perfect life, to be what everyone expected. "I understand that better than anyone," I said gently. "Do you?" she asked. "You've always seemed so certain about your choices, even when they didn't match what Mom and Dad wanted." I laughed softly. "Trust me, it wasn't easy. I just reached my breaking point earlier, I guess. Medical school was my rebellion." "Some rebellion," she smiled weakly. "Becoming a doctor. For our family, absolutely. I chose a path that prioritized service over status, that values competence over appearances. It was the most radical thing I could imagine." "Amber considered this. I've never had a rebellion." "It's not too late to start," I offered. She nodded slowly. "I think this situation is going to force one, whether I'm ready or not." In that moment, despite everything, I felt closer to my sister than I had in years. The perfect facade had cracked wide open, revealing the vulnerable, authentic person beneath. "Whatever comes next," I promised her, "you won't face it alone." The aftermath of a fraudulent marriage unfolded in ways none of us could have anticipated. What began as a family crisis evolved into a complex web of legal proceedings, emotional reckonings, and unexpected growth. I extended my emergency leave from the residency program, grateful for understanding supervisors who approved a full week when they heard the bare outlines of the situation. Those 7 days became some of the most important in my relationship with my sister. Amber moved temporarily into Megan's spare bedroom, unable to face returning to the condo she'd shared with Jason during their engagement. Each day revealed new aspects of his deception. Credit cards she hadn't known about, loan applications with her forged signature, even a safe deposit box containing multiple phones and IDs. The legal implications multiplied quickly. Beyond the fraudulent marriage, Jason had committed multiple financial crimes. The district attorney's office became involved coordinating with authorities in 3 states where he had operated similar schemes. Despite an interstate search, he remained elusive, though his accounts showed activity moving progressively southward. Our parents processed the scandal in predictably different ways. My father approached it as a business problem to be solved, hiring additional investigators and legal counsel focusing on recovering assets and building a case. My mother retreated, socially canceling engagements and avoiding calls, paralyzed by the thought of gossip circulating through her carefully cultivated social circles. I split my time between supporting Amber through practical matters and mediating between her and our parents. The dynamics had shifted dramatically. Amber's natural deference to their wishes had been replaced by a wary distance, while they oscillated between overprotectiveness and awkward uncertainty about how to relate to her in this new reality. 3 days after the wedding disaster, I accompanied Amber to meet with a therapist specializing in relationship trauma. Using my medical connections, I'd found someone reputable who could see her quickly. "Are you sure you don't want to come in with me?" Amber asked, hesitating outside the office door. "This is for you," I encouraged her. "I'll be right here when you're done." That first session lasted nearly 2 hours. Amber emerged with reddened eyes but straighter shoulders, clutching a handful of worksheets and resources. "She thinks I've been people-pleasing my whole life," Amber told me as we walked to a nearby cafe afterward. "Creating a version of myself I thought others wanted even before Jason." "Does that resonate with you?" I asked carefully. "Yes," she admitted. "Especially with Mom and Dad. I've always been the good daughter, doing everything right, never causing problems. While I was the difficult one, always pushing boundaries, I noted with a small smile. You were brave," she corrected me. I envied that. The revelation stunned me. "You envied me, but your life always seemed so perfect. Perfectly constrained." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "The therapist suggested I might have been vulnerable to someone like Jason precisely because I was so practiced at molding myself to others' expectations. He just had to figure out what role I wanted to play and then cast himself as the perfect co-star." Her insight impressed me. Even amid heartbreak, Amber was demonstrating a self-awareness I hadn't given her credit for. The 4th day brought the most difficult confrontation yet. Our parents arrived at Megan's apartment unannounced, having decided Amber had hidden away long enough. "This self-imposed exile isn't healthy," my mother announced, sweeping into the living room in full maternal authority mode. "You need to come home where we can properly support you." Amber, who had been reviewing documents with her lawyer on the couch, looked up calmly. "I'm perfectly well supported here, Mom." "But people are talking," my mother persisted. "Your absence is fueling speculation. If you just make a brief appearance at the club, show everyone you're holding up well—" "I'm not holding up well," Amber interrupted. "I'm angry and humiliated and processing a massive betrayal. Why would I pretend otherwise?" My father stepped forward. "Your mother is just concerned about appearances," Amber finished for him. As always, she set aside her papers, facing them directly. "That's exactly why I need space from both of you right now. This obsession with maintaining perfect appearances is part of what got us here." My mother looked stricken. "That's unfair, Amber. We only ever wanted—" "I know what you wanted," Amber cut in, her voice gaining strength. "The perfect daughter with the perfect husband living the perfect life you designed. But it wasn't real, Mom. None of it was real." The tension in the room was palpable. I moved to sit beside Amber, a silent show of support that didn't go unnoticed by our parents. "I see you've both united against us," my mother said stiffly. "This isn't about taking sides," I replied. "It's about acknowledging that our family dynamics need to change. The pressure to maintain appearances above all else has hurt all of us, just in different ways." My father, ever the pragmatist, recognized the impasse. Perhaps we should give you more time, he conceded, placing a restraining hand on my mother's arm. But remember, we're here when you're ready. After they left, Amber exhaled shakily. That's the first time I've ever really stood up to them. You did brilliantly, I assured her. It's not easy breaking lifelong patterns. It feels terrible and liberating at the same time, she admitted. The confrontation painful as it was marked, a turning point. Our parents backed off, allowing Amber the space she needed. Meanwhile, she began making decisions that surprised everyone, myself included. First came her announcement that she wouldn't be returning to her influencer career. It was all curated perfection, she explained. I can't go back to that knowing how hollow it was. Then she revealed her intention to sell the condo she'd shared with Jason and find a smaller place in the city, not in the upscale neighborhood our parents had helped them choose, but in a diverse artistic area I would never have, associated with my traditionally conservative sister. Most shocking to our parents was her decision to enroll in university courses for the fall semester, pursuing the education she'd abbreviated when her social media career took off. I always wanted to study environmental science, she confessed to me, but it didn't fit the image. By the 6th day, as my return to Chicago approached, Amber had developed a concrete plan for her immediate future. She would stay with Megan until finding her own apartment, continue therapy, cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation, and prepare for her classes. The transformation wasn't complete, but the foundation was laid. That evening, we sat together on Megan's balcony, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in gold and pink. I've been thinking about moving to Chicago, Amber said suddenly. Really, I couldn't hide my surprise. There are good schools there, and... She hesitated. I'd be near you. I've missed having my sister in my life. The simple statement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'd like that, I managed to say. This awful situation made me realize something, she continued. When everything was falling apart, you were the first person I wanted to call. Not Mom or Dad, not my supposed friends who've mostly disappeared since the scandal. You. I'll always be there for you, I promised. I know that now. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. It took a catastrophe for me to figure out who really matters in my life. As darkness fell over the city, we talked more openly than we had in years about our childhoods, our parents' expectations, the different paths we'd chosen, and the possibility of building a more authentic relationship moving forward. The disaster that had nearly destroyed Amber had also improbably created space for something new to grow between us. Not the performed closeness of holiday photos and coordinated social media posts, but something real-rooted in shared understanding and mutual support. The following morning, as I packed for my return to Chicago, Amber helped fold my clothes, a simple act of sisterhood that felt significant in its normalcy. You know, she said thoughtfully, when Mom first suggested the live stream for you, I was secretly relieved. I thought if you watched remotely, you wouldn't notice how anxious I actually was. I noticed anyway, I told her. Even through a screen. Maybe that's what sisters do, see past the performance to what's really happening. Maybe so, I agreed. Though I think we're both still learning how to do that consistently. Before leaving for the airport, I made her promise to continue our newly established daily calls. Chicago isn't so far, I reminded her. Just a short flight away. I'll start looking at programs there next week, she confirmed, after meeting with the DA's office again. As we hugged goodbye, I felt the strange gratitude that sometimes emerges from disaster, not for the pain itself, but for the growth it forces and the connections it strengthens. The catastrophic wedding live stream had frozen on chaos, capturing a moment of terrible revelation. But from that frozen image, something fluid and authentic had begun to flow, a new understanding between sisters, a more honest relationship with our parents, and Amber's emerging sense of self beyond the roles she'd been assigned. Some revelations arrive quietly through gradual realization. Others crash into our lives through frozen screens and public scandals. Either way, the truth eventually finds its way to the surface. 1 month after the disastrous wedding, I stood in my Chicago apartment, rearranging furniture to create space for my visitor. Amber would be arriving that evening, her first trip since the ordeal began. She was coming to tour universities, explore neighborhoods, and, though she wouldn't admit it directly, test whether relocating near me felt right. The weeks since my return to residency had brought significant developments. Jason had finally been apprehended in Florida, attempting to board a cruise ship with a new identity and a substantial amount of cash. He now faced multiple charges across several jurisdictions, with the prosecutor confident about securing a conviction. Most of Amber's stolen funds had been recovered, though the emotional damage couldn't be so easily remedied. My phone rang, my mother calling for our now regular weekly check-in. Another change prompted by the crisis. "Is Amber's room ready?" she asked after preliminary greetings. "I've transferred money for you girls to have dinner at that restaurant she mentioned wanting to try." "Everything's set," I assured her. "And we can pay for our own dinner, Mom," she sighed. "Let me do this small thing, Rebecca. I'm trying." And she was. Both our parents were making genuine, if imperfect, efforts to relate differently to their daughters. My father had stopped pressuring Amber about her career plans, instead offering to connect her with environmental scientists in his network when she expressed interest. My mother had begun therapy herself, a development I never would have predicted, and was gradually loosening her grip on controlling family narratives. "I know you're trying," I acknowledged. "We all are." After hanging up, I completed my preparations and headed to the airport. Waiting at the arrival gate, I spotted Amber immediately, though her appearance had changed substantially. Gone were the carefully highlighted hair designer clothes and immaculate makeup that had been her uniform. Instead, she wore jeans, a simple blouse, and minimal cosmetics, her natural hair color growing in at the roots. She looked younger, and somehow more herself. "Welcome to Chicago," I greeted her with a warm hug. "It feels good to be here," she replied, her smile reaching her eyes. "Away from all the history." During the drive to my apartment, Amber shared updates on her therapy progress and the ongoing legal proceedings. Laura testified yesterday she mentioned referring to Jason's first wife. She provided records going back years. "How did that feel, seeing her again?" "Strangely, I felt connected to her," Amber admitted. "We were both victims of the same manipulation, just at different stages. She's actually been incredibly supportive." This unlikely alliance was one of many surprising developments. Another was Amber's growing friendship with Marcus, Jason's former best man, who had ultimately exposed the truth. Once the full extent of Jason's deception became clear, Marcus had become an important witness and unexpected ally. "I've been thinking about what happens after all this," Amber said as we entered my apartment. "After the legal process ends, after the media finally loses interest." "What do you want to happen?" I asked, helping her with her bags. "I want to build something real," she said simply. "A life based on what I actually care about, not what photographs well or impresses others." "Hence the university applications," I noted. "Exactly. I've spent so many years presenting a curated version of myself. I want to develop the substance beneath the image." Over dinner at a local restaurant, which we insisted on paying for ourselves despite our mother's transfer, Amber shared her tentative plans. She'd applied to 3 Chicago universities with strong environmental science programs. She'd begun volunteering with a conservation organization while waiting for the fall semester. She was considering a small apartment in a neighborhood not far from mine. "What about dating?" I asked, cautiously aware the topic might be sensitive. She laughed, surprising me. "Absolutely not, at least for now. I need to figure out who I am before involving anyone else in the equation. Besides," she added, "with newfound self-awareness, I've realized I used relationships as a way to define myself. Jason exploited that perfectly." "That's incredibly insightful," I said, impressed. "Therapy 3 times a week will do that," she replied wryly. The weekend unfolded with university tours, apartment viewings, and long conversations over coffee. Amber seemed to gain energy and clarity with each passing day, as if physical distance from Connecticut accelerated her personal growth. On Sunday evening, our last night before she returned east, we sat on my small balcony overlooking the city lights. I've decided, she said suddenly. I'm moving here in August. You're sure? I asked, trying to contain my happiness at the prospect. Completely. I need this fresh start and… She hesitated. I need my sister. The simple admission touched me deeply. I need my sister too, I replied. I think I always have. It's strange, she mused, how a catastrophe can sometimes set things right. If the live stream hadn't frozen at that exact moment, if I hadn't seen everyone's genuine reactions captured in that frame, you might have tried to salvage the unsalvageable. I finished for her. Exactly. Seeing the chaos exposed so brutally made it impossible to keep pretending. We fell silent, contemplating how a technical glitch had inadvertently catalyzed profound change. Our parents are different too, I noted. Not completely transformed, but evolving. Dad called me directly last week, not about you or family matters, but just to ask about my day. I nearly dropped the phone in shock. Amber laughed. Mom actually listened when I told her I didn't want a big farewell party before moving. The old mom would have ignored me and planned it anyway. Small steps, I acknowledged, but meaningful ones. The next morning at the airport, our goodbye felt different from previous partings. Not the perfunctory hugs of people living separate lives, but the temporary separation of two people now genuinely connected. 6 weeks until you're back for good, I reminded her. I've already started packing, she confirmed. We embraced one last time before she headed to security. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing the real me, even when I couldn't. As I watched her disappear into the terminal, I reflected on the unexpected journey we'd traveled. A frozen screen capturing chaos had become the catalyst for authentic connection. What began as a fraudulent wedding had somehow cleared space for genuine relationships to emerge. Sometimes we need our carefully constructed worlds to collapse before we can build something true. Sometimes we must witness disaster to recognize what really matters. And sometimes it takes seeing ourselves through a screen frozen in a moment of unfiltered reaction to finally understand who we truly are and what we really need. The live stream had failed in its intended purpose of letting me witness my sister's perfect wedding. Instead, it had succeeded in a far more important way, allowing me to truly see my sister, perhaps for the first time. And in that seeing, to find a path back to each other, beyond the performances and expectations that had separated us for so long. From the chaos of that frozen screen, something real had finally emerged. Not the picture-perfect family we'd pretended to be, but the authentically imperfect one we actually were. And somehow that felt like a far more valuable revelation than any wedding could have provided. Have you ever had a moment when technology failing actually led to something important being revealed? Or a time when what seemed like a disaster ultimately created positive change in your relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you connected with our journey, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes chaos can be the beginning of something beautiful. Thank you for witnessing this chapter of my story. I'm grateful to have you along for the journey.